Yeah, thanks again to the lovely ladies for this relaxing music, because I was super nervous and now I'm a little bit less super nervous. So it's great that you're all here. A full house today, some familiar faces in the crowd. And today I'm going to talk about something new, and I developed this presentation completely for today, so lucky you. And my presentation is titled Relationship Therapy for Things and Their People. And my company is called A New State of Matter. And it feels a little bit like I'm preaching to the choir here when I say that we have a system that is completely bogus. We take things from the ground and we pile them up in big piles of trash. And this is of course why we also have places like Blue City, where we are today, to help us rethink how we can move things to a more blue, circular, green, whatever kind of economy, but not what we have now. So what's the deal, right? We're faced with endless numbers of options of products to choose from, but we can never really settle. We go from product to product, tossing out the old, we gotta have the new. Because of this, we never really get the time to get to know our things or what they're feeling. The things never really seem to quite fit, and this is forcing us into a mutually abusive relationship. So people, it is time for some relationship therapy. So I was involved with 3D printing for a while now, and at some point I realized, man, we're only 3D printing bunnies and Yodas and all kinds of crap. And this 3D printing was being heralded as this great technology that is supposed to, you know, give us products that are specifically for us, but okay, why bunnies? So I decided to make better use of the technology, and I had this broken headphone lying around, and it broke, and then I thought, well, maybe I can 3D print the headband. So I contacted the company and asked them, can you send me the 3D file? And they were like, well, no, IP, you know, copyright, all those things. We'll send you a new headphone. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm a designer. I can just redesign the headband and 3D print it myself, but it's a bother. So I did, and it gave me another headphone worth of $200 that I could give to a friend. And I thought, well, there might be something here. And then I had another friend who had a baby stroller, and the baby stroller's brake was broken. So I 3D printed that thing. And this time I also contacted the company, but this time they were a little bit more receptive. So I was able to collaborate with them in sort of a little research project. And I put some students to work, because, you know, why do the work yourself? And they designed a couple of different add-ons for this baby stroller. Not only things for repair, but also upgrades. And the way that I imagined that this would work was that the friend I had, whose baby stroller was broken, he would be able to go on the internet and just order this part. And then with a really simple repair guide, he would be able to fix his own stroller. Now, I also wanted to know if this was actually good for the environment. So the students, they did a life cycle assessment, and they researched if the parts had actually impact on the environment. And then they also calculated how long the person would actually have to have the stroller for a longer period of time in order to justify, basically, to print those parts. And it turns out it was only a couple of weeks. So this is a really good story, right? People want to have these cool upgrades for their baby stroller. They keep the stroller longer, and there's less environmental impact. So I said to the company, you know, let's continue this. But they kind of left me hanging. And the reason that they did that, I figured, is because on the one hand, they have this model where they sell a baby stroller to someone, and then they get money for it. But after that, you know, there's no contact anymore with the user of the stroller. And what I was imagining was more that, you know, they sell the stroller more as a service, so they can, the owner pays over the lifetime of the stroller, and then that also is an excuse to do these kind of things with 3D printing. But that's not the case, so they have to transition from this one business model to the next, but it has a lot of resistance. And I felt this resistance. And I couldn't really solve it. I wasn't able to really get out of this, this itch. So I'm like, the producer doesn't want to take the first step, but the consumer is also powerless. So who do we have left then? Well, what if the product takes the first step? And he just goes out and gets his parts replaced. So this was the new idea. Like I thought, okay, what if products can actually decide themselves what needs to be done with them? And I started researching into this, and apparently it's not a new idea. In 1872, this guy named Edward Tyler already coined what he called animism, in which he described how quote-unquote primitive cultures were attributing life qualities to inanimate objects. For example, the ancient Hawaiians, they believed that when they shaped their surfboards, that they were imbuing it with mana, or life essence. And also, by the time that we got to this mass-manufactured consumer culture that we had people trying out different ways of relating to objects. She's called Yvonne Dreugen-Wendel, and her last name was Dreugen, and the name of the cupboard that she married was Wendel. So now she's called Yvonne Dreugen-Wendel. And then in the age of the internet, we saw other people also inventing these new things of relating to objects. This was done 6 years ago by a guy called Simone Rabaudengo. Rabaudengo, right? Yeah. And he invented Brad the toaster. And Brad was a little toaster that wanted really to be used. And at some point, when the owner didn't use him enough, he just walked away. And then last year, in Saudi Arabia, this robot got citizenship rights. And the women of Saudi Arabia were really outraged because they were like, this robot's got more rights than us? Why? And I was like, well, if this robot can get that many rights, then why can't consumer products also get rights? And then, so the government of Saudi Arabia, they decided to give these rights to this robot. So apparently governments can give rights to man-made objects. So also strollers. And what do they really do when they give rights to these objects? Huh? So a government writes these laws, and laws are just basically a series of just lines of text describing what needs to be, like what are the codes of conduct basically. So you as a person, you're asked to abide by the law of the country, and also products, they can be asked to abide by the law of the country. You can imagine that a law can also be expressed, these codes of conduct, it already says it in the word code, can also be programmed code, and you can program this into a product. And the way that, you know, and then of course, like laws, they have to be enforced by judges, and contracts, they have to be verified by notaries. But in the digital age, this isn't necessary anymore. If you make a digital contract, this can be automatically executed, basically, by having it in the blockchain. And the blockchain, if you know Bitcoin, is the accounting system for the Bitcoin. So there's a way for products to be given a certain amount of autonomy, and for them to be able to act on it in this digital age. So how would this work? So we're back to the problem again, and we're going to zoom in on this part, and then we're going to go right there where something goes wrong, and we're going to intervene there. So this is where you would have, for example, bought a stroller, and you would have signed one of these smart contracts. That means that the product can now think, well, if my part breaks, what am I to do? I know that if I go to a landfill, that's going to be bad for the planet. I also know that if I do something more of a repair or a remanufacture thing, that's going to have positive financial incentives in the long term. So what does the product do? The product decides to repair itself and go back to the owner. Now, the thing that's good for the owner is not necessarily always the thing that's good for everyone else. So there's a difference in between the positive financial incentives or the positive outcomes for the individual or for the collective. And this is also the thing that our world leaders are dealing with at the climate conferences. They're trying to agree on not to output too much CO2 emissions. But the problem here is that this is a really hard game to play because there's no central authority to actually hold them to these promises. They didn't sign any contract. It's sometimes also referred to as a tragedy of the commons because they have to take care of a common good. But the more players you get, at some point, if one player decides to be irrational, like Donald Trump, and he decides to defect, then the whole treaty is basically fucked. So that's why they call it a tragedy of the commons, and it's a really hard game to play. And this is also kind of like there's actually people who've studied this in game theory and tried to think like, how do we get out of this game? So how do products or how do machines actually play games? Tic-tac-toe is still relatively easy. There's only 765 possible options of X's and O's to be placed on the board. So that's something that you can let a computer calculate by brute force. But when you get to a game of chess, there's already 10 to the 120th options of possible chess pieces on the board. And this is more than atoms in the universe. So you can't really crack that code with brute force anymore. So you need strategies. So what are the computer scientists doing when they're trying to get a machine how to learn how to play a game? Well, they just let it play a lot. And then at some point, when the machine wins, it gets a reward. So it knows, I have to take these steps to actually get to a positive result. So then it plays again, and then every time it plays it a little bit better. But there's a problem there because there are so many options. It needs to know like which steps of actions are the best that I can take to actually get to a fruitful outcome, to a win. So it needs to explore these. Branches. And this is actually a problem that humans also face. When do I explore, or when do I exploit? And it's a problem that is discussed in this book, Algorithms to Live By. And what they say in the book is, for example, if you come to a new city like Rotterdam, you just came here, and you're looking for a good restaurant, then your best option is to try as many different restaurants as possible in order to find a good one, in order for you to have the highest chance of having a good meal tonight. But if you are just about to leave Rotterdam and you want to go out and have a good meal, then your best option is to stick with the restaurants that you already know. So it all depends on the interval that you have. And for computers, it all depends on the amount of computing power that you have. So if you think about, this is when we really get to the topic of curiosity, huh? This is the payoff, this is what you came for. So curiosity, sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. Babies, when they're just born, they explore everything. They try out everything. The whole world is new to them. They have no formal way of knowing what to do in this world. So they just try out everything. They animate their little dragon dolls. But once you get older, you get more set in your ways, because you've already learned a lot, and these models that you've learned, those are the ones that you're kind of coasting on to get you through the world. And this is why old people are also grumpy, because they're like, when they encounter new situations, they're like, that's not how it's supposed to be done. I know better, but the world is constantly changing. And the world is constantly changing at an increasingly fast rate. So actually we need to stay more and more curious. And I'm really curious about technology. That is also why I went to TU Delft. Like, I find technology fascinating. And what I realized is, like, when you're curious about this and you're trying to think about how can the future be with this technology, you have to start thinking in scenarios. And technology can be good, and it can also bring bad things. But what I think that we should do is we should try to imagine positive scenarios. At least try to create scenarios with a positive intent, and then we can critique them, and then see, like, why are the loopholes, and find out, you know, how should we actually proceed. So I also created a little scenario, and it's a work in progress, but then after my talk you can critique me about it and we can have a discussion. So here it is. This is me in the future, who knows how distant, and I'm shopping online. I'm trying to just window shopping, and then I read something on this website about if you hand in your old products, we're going to give you credit for being able to get new products. So I click on the button and sign up for the service, and already within a few minutes I hear a knock on the window. And there's this little guy floating in front of the window, and he's like, "Hey, can I come in? I'm from the service." I'm like, "Okay, sure, come in." And then he's like, "Can I just have a look around the house?" And I'm like, "Okay, go ahead." And it just goes about all through the house, checking every closet, every cupboard. And then it comes back and it's like, "Well, I found a bunch of shit lying around your house." I found this old toasty iron that you never use. I found these skateboards. Man, when was the last time you went skateboarding? And it's like, what if I take all these things, then I'll give you these coupons, and you get new phones, you can get new bicycles, you can get new clothes. So I'm like, okay, that sounds good. That sounds good. So I asked my neighbor to help me take out all the stuff out to the autonomous vehicle of the delivery service. And then I'm like, "No, it took my vacuum cleaner. No," and the neighbor is like, "Sorry, I thought it was so old. I thought it also had to go." Shit. Okay, so I have to go now get a new vacuum cleaner. And what do I imagine that this looks like in this, let's say, near future? I don't think I'll go to the store anymore because these products are now autonomous. So I go online, and apparently there's this dating service for vacuum cleaners. So I sign up, and then I go out dating with Roombas. So I walk past the stand, and then I hear like, "Hey, gorgeous." And this Roomba's talking to me, so I go up to the Roomba and I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" And she's like, "Hey, what was the relationship with your father like?" And that's it. Thank you. So you can find me on Instagram and on the internet. Thank you.